As some of you may know, I am a Mexican American. My mother and father were both born in Mexico, but I was born here in the United States. When I was younger, I believed this was a disadvantage and even something to be ashamed of. I had a more difficult time in school because, unlike my peers, my parents never had an education. They always worked to feed their families and never had the opportunities that were thrown at me. I remember as a child my English being a bit broken because my mother's grasp on the language wasn't great. She taught me Spanish first, since it was the language she was most comfortable with, and taught me whatever English she could after. This led to some difficulty in school, but I eventually overcame it just like any other person would and should. My English is still a little rough whenever I become stressed or overly excited and I revert back to my Spanish, but I've spent a long time studying and reading so I can become as fluent as I can in this beautiful language we call English. Now I think back to these struggles and smile with pride at my family's efforts towards a better education, but back then I felt totally different. I felt betrayed by life for having been born disadvantaged. I felt anger at my parents for not being able to help me how I saw all my friends' parents help them. The emotion I most regret feeling, however, is shame. I felt shame whenever we were out in a store and my mom tried speaking Spanish to the cashier, or whenever I was caught in public speaking Spanish, or when I had to translate something that my mom couldn't quite understand. I felt shame for so long that I avoided using my Spanish as much as humanly possible. I would respond to my mother in English, even though she was speaking Spanish to me. I'd pretend like as if I didn't know Spanish if I was out with friends, and even belittle my own language and people because I had no pride in it myself. I'm sure that this is a story that can be shared amongst any of my immigrant brothers, not just with Spanish, but with any other language that is not English. I've had the privilege of having friends of all sorts of nationalities and cultures, from Vietnamese to Russian, from Chinese to Italian. Each and every single one of these cultures share the same characteristics as mine, but to an even more extreme degree of shame when trying to assimilate to a new culture. At the very least with Spanish, right? There are so many of us in the United States that I can feel comfortable going into just about any shop in some neighborhoods and know that I can speak Spanish with someone else, or that my culture is always represented in media because of the sheer amount of Latin Americans in the United States. Hell, even right now, the pendulum is swung once again in our favor. It's suddenly become cool to be Latin American again. There seems to be a movement in media of having pride in being a Mexican, when just 5 years ago the pendulum swung another way, and that our own people thought that our ancestry was dirty or not as refined as any other culture. At the very least, my parents had enough pride in themselves to share their culture, their food, and their language with me so I could have the privilege of knowing them and loving them. But even with all this acceptance, there's still a big portion of my generation who still choose to reject their culture, not learn the language, not partake in any celebration because of their shame. And they always eventually mature to the point that they realize that they have made a horrible mistake and try their best to learn what should have been ingrained in them from the very start of their life. Something I have noticed is that this problem is even worse amongst any other group of immigrants. For every one kid that chose not to learn Spanish in a Spanish household, there are 15 Vietnamese kids who chose not to learn their parents' language out of shame. Out of shame for their language being so different from English. Out of shame for thinking that people will think that their food is strange and culture not like any other. I cannot speak with 100% certainty, but when I have asked people of this culture why their American born children don't learn the language, I hear that it isn't just the children choosing not to learn the language, but it is the parents trying to protect their children from the prejudice that the outside world will have against their culture. Again, this is something I can't understand since I have the privilege of my people being everywhere. Obviously, it's not all on the parents and not all on the children, but I made this video in hopes that someone who is in the position that I was once in will watch it and learn. I want you to know that your culture is beautiful, and you will reach a point one day where you find someone you trust, be it a friend or a lover, who you feel comfortable enough with to share your culture or to even relearn it with them. My best friend is Vietnamese. When we first met, he didn't show it at all and would never mention it. I went to one festival from his culture, and then it became a normal thing for us to go out and enjoy his culture and he mine. It's a beautiful thing to see someone so excited to share something that not many other people will get to see. And it's great to experience something different and find a cuisine that you love, or have respect for a religion that, while may not be your own, you can choose to accept its teachings and live a better life because of it. It's great to feel like you have infinite trust in someone that even if they don't like an activity or food from your culture, that they will respect it as your own. Now my friend is trying his best to become more proficient in his language. I don't want to take credit for it since his actions are his own, and I have a great respect for him in the endeavor he has chosen, but I feel like I had a, albeit small, part in showing him that he is just as valid as everyone else, and that there are people out there that truly appreciate you for you, and that there is no shame in being you. I want you, listener, to know that your culture is beautiful, and that the people around you will accept it and even put it on a pedestal. Fuck, I mean, just look at Japanese or French culture in America. They are both two beautiful cultures that made it quote unquote mainstream in our media, and now the average American idolizes them and even deludes themselves into thinking that they are better cultures than their own. Well, this is not true, and every culture is just as equally interesting if you decide to look at them with open eyes. This is proof that people love things that are different and seem fun. Don't hesitate to show your friends your culture because you think it is strange or that they may not like it. Just do it. You'll be pleasantly surprised that people are more willing than you think they are to try something new, or how amazed they'll be that you're so proficient in a language so different from theirs that it almost seems alien. Remember that all of the self hatred that you feel is exactly that, from the self. Once you open yourself up to other people, you will realize that other people love your culture as much as they love you. They just don't know it yet because they haven't had the privilege of learning it. You may feel that there is shame in asking your parents to teach you their language after rejecting it for so long, but there is no shame. And any parent would gladly help their children learn the culture that they grew up in. You will see the pride in their eyes when you, with no shame, speak their language to them over dinner at a nice restaurant, or you partake in a celebration that you would have previously avoided and just locked yourself in your room to wait out. Your parents will be happy that you're trying to include someone who is not from your culture into your culture and see that they love it and want to learn as much as they can about it. Even more importantly, you will have accepted a part of yourself that you didn't even know you had rejected, and you will feel so much more whole and content because of it. You will feel like you have one less thing to hide about yourself, like another part of yourself has stepped outside of the shadows and into the light. Remember that your culture is yours, and you must wear it on your sleeve, be it to honor your parents and grandparents or to simply just honor yourself. If you haven't learned your parents' language or culture, try to. A voice in the back of your head will say that it has no real life application or that it is stupid, but just ignore it. Realize that the point of life is self acceptance, and you will be all the more powerful for it. The spice of life is variety, and once you learn that, life will seem even more fun than it does now. You'll be eager to teach people things that are precious to your culture, and you will be even more excited to learn things about another. You will teach your children your language, and they will readily accept it and make it their own. You will smile knowing that you have learned to love yourself and to love everyone else's culture around you. Just know that I am proud of you for deciding that you want to learn your culture and that hopefully you'll invite me to try something new one day. I'm just kidding about that last part, by the way, but I genuinely am excited and proud of you, and I hope that you get success in this brand new endeavor. Now go out there and learn